Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Friday, as always, Boss Rush. And we are here on Friday the 13th. It's a little ominous, but it means that we got to bring in a special guest with us on this week's Boss Rush. First, my name is Chris Melasinos. I'm the principal evangelist for video games here at AWS. And as always with me is...
Dean Takahashi. I'm editorial director for GamesBeat.
Yes, and hello, Dean. And with us is...
Hi, everybody. I'm Amir Satvat. I'm the founder of Amir Satvat's game community and a BD director at Tencent Games.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. Hooray. We got Amir finally joining us on this week's episode of Boss Rush. And as we talked about, I think earlier in the year, we're going to look at bringing more guests on, but Amir, we're so happy to have you here. We're sorry that Mark is a little under the weather, not able to join us. Susan is out at an event, and so she was unable to join us, and Amir was gracious enough to fill in the third chair for today. So
for our first ever guest. Yay.
For our first ever guest. That's exactly right. Yay.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and love the show, guys. It's so cool to be here.
Oh, are you kidding me? We love having you here. We love having you here. All right.
Thank you. We've been practicing for like more than a year for this.
and we're still trying to figure it out, man. We are still trying to figure out how all of this stuff works. But we've got so...
Chris has it
down. What's that?
Chris has it down.
Well... You know, every once in a while, but you got to remember which buttons. If I go away for at least 2 or 3 days, and I forget how all this crap works on this side. But, oh my goodness, we have got so much to dig into for the week. Also, if anybody that's watching, if you have any questions for any of us here in the panel, please go ahead and put it into the chat, either on YouTube or on LinkedIn, and we'll go ahead and get to them. But yeah, I think... we need to just jump right into the big news, which I know Amir has been writing posts about with the launch of the Switch 2 and kind of all of that stuff. And we definitely want to go ahead and get those thoughts. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up GamesBeat here. And the first big news article right there in the front. Nintendo sells 3.5 million Switch 2 consoles in 4 days. Unbelievable. Dean, Amir, dig into this one while I check levels on the site.
Well, it's good news for the whole game economy and for gamers, right? And I think when you have a successful console launch, then the excitement comes back to the industry. And I think there were a lot of naysayers out there who were noting that, they only had one major game, which was Mario Kart World, a lot of third-party titles that have appeared on other platforms. So, in some ways you could say some of the odds were stacked against this, but they did prepare well. Like, it's backward compatible. They have a lot of older titles like Zelda titles that will run on this machine. So I think there's plenty to keep people busy.
Yeah, I think Dean's spot on. I mean, look, I can see both sides of the story. Obviously, as you both and anyone who has a pulse who knows me, I'm obviously a big Nintendo fan person, but I see both sides. Like, for the fan people, there's everything Dean just mentioned. I think what was not maybe pushed as much is, in addition to the premium upgrades, of which there's a few, there's like 20, 30 games that they just straight up upgraded for free. And I think if you're someone who had those titles and was sitting on them, many friends I know are literally going back and just replaying deep into their 1P library. They know that Donkey Kong is coming within a month. They know that likely a Mario game is coming by the end of the year. But I also appreciate the other side, which is we'll have to see how much longevity this has. They clearly were well prepared in terms of the hardware, but it is a rich price point. Will it continue on that strong trajectory? I hope so.
Yeah, no, nothing to argue about, no lies detected. But, the other thing, too, is I think people were like, well, we want to see what they're going to do with this new machine before, it was revealed what it was going to look like, because Nintendo was known for really kind of changing things up for each generation. I think they were incredibly smart by leaning into exactly what works, keeping that same type of form factor, listening to the fans about, making the controls a little bit bigger, not having to have those slide-on button, extensions for the original, Switch controllers. I mean, my hands are pretty large, right? So playing with those little ones didn't work quite well. but also putting into new innovation. This is what they always do really, really well, which is the next system has one or two slight innovations. Mouse control remains to be seen, like how many games are going to take advantage of this. But, when people are like saying, well, it's Mario Kart. It's not Mario Kart. Yes, it's Mario Kart, but there's this whole other world of fandom and just joy, Nintendo joy to go ahead and explore. So for me, it's bigger than just a Mario Kart thing. And also getting to see the games that we love kind of up-res, better texture packs, right? These sorts of things. I've had nothing but a blast with it. But I will confess, the one that I've been playing a lot of on is Picross. And I went and downloaded the Namco Picross pack for like $8. And so for as much Mario Kart World that I'm playing basically a tiny puzzle game on there, which is just absolutely joyous too. So absolutely love it. And congratulations to Nintendo for blowing away not only expectations, but these numbers. Really amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting as well, Chris and Dean, is like I'm seeing a lot of these storylines now of some people coming on the other side and being like, well, it'll come in soft, it'll only be at 30, it'll only be at 40. And what I tell them, which I think is interesting, is we all remember how for Breath of the Wild, they cross-released on Wii U and on Switch. I played the Wii U version. It's a great game, but it really was a little bit on fumes. I think we all know as well that by the time we got to Tears of the Kingdom, again, game of the year candidate type game, but really running on hardware fumes in terms of the FPS. That's why I think it is very unlikely that when they release the new Zelda game, it will be on old Switch, even though they have 150 million users, if I was to guess, just because of the specs. And I even wonder if that'll be true for Mario. And that's an interesting decision of, do they make it for both, or do they push everything forward to Switch 2? And if they did, that would be the moment for a very strong migration.
Yeah. Yeah. It was kind of like when you're running the new, when you're running Tears of Kingdom, you went, well, if I squint hard enough, yeah, then I can excuse some of the frame rate drop stuff. Like, it was still beautiful, and they wringed every bit that they could, right, out of that platform.
And back to those skeptical people, I guess that this was too expensive or whatever. I think they start out of the gate fast. 3.5 million, setting a record. They're forecasting 15 million in this fiscal year, and then they also hit the $152 million target by starting out slower than this with the Switch the last time around. So I think the naysayer, they're on track then, theoretically, for 150 million for the Switch too. So you can't say this is a failure, right?
Oh, I think anybody that's saying it's a failure is just saying it because they either don't like the price, don't like Nintendo, don't like. By every account, this was a home run for them. We have a couple of questions that did pop up in the chat here. James Lockwood. Hey, James. He said he loves Nintendo. I'm a bit sour grapes of reserving GameCube for it instead of making it available for the OG Switch. But when they launched that GameCube thing and I saw Wind Waker, and I was like, I know one friend that is going to be exceedingly happy that it was there at launch. Right.
Yeah, no, that was really great. I still hope, although the odds are maybe longer now, that we'll get the Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD. But yeah, that was really, really cool. What was I going to say about what Dean said? Another thing about what Dean said that I think is super interesting is I think we always have to be cautious about these compares, right? Comparing the Switch 2 to the Switch in many ways isn't a fair compare. One, you're talking about, if I remember right, I think the second best selling console after PlayStation 2. You can't possibly expect that that's a replicable expected outcome. And second of all, Switch 2 was selling through COVID. You had Animal Crossing and all of that.
Yeah.
So I also just think like baselining it as that being the compare is just not reasonable.
Yeah. I would add one other thing to that. If you go back and look at history, why did the PlayStation 2 sell as fast as it did? Do you all remember why? No? Because at the time the PlayStation 2 was released in the market, it was the best performing and lowest cost DVD player that you could buy at the time. And in Japan, when it launched, the 1-to-1 attach rate for it was the Matrix movie. So literally people were buying PS2s because it was a way to get this new technology into the home with the best quality, the cheapest price, and it was a movie, not video games, that attached themselves to the PS2. So
It also
yeah.
helped that it had Grand Theft Auto exclusively on it.
Well, not in the beginning, it didn't. In the
Right.
beginning, you had, what is it, Fantavision? You had the fireworks explosion game, right? Okay.
Right. Fantavision.
Right. So it really isn't a fair comparison if you were to go and kind of strip what we assume, kind of that part of the market looks like. Is it a more even comparison? And that's to take nothing away from the PS2 because it was just an extraordinary machine, right? But anyway, that's it on Switch 2. Love it. I'm having a ton of fun with it. Ping us on our DMs and stuff if you need other friend codes to go in and connect us to. Yeah. Travis actually he said, general question, do you think Nintendo's success will make other console creators reconsider their platform agnostic approach? I don't think so. I think Nintendo doesn't compete with other game companies. Nintendo just does what Nintendo is going to do, right? So I don't see them in the same way that I see, for instance, my PlayStation or my Xbox or something like that.
Well, there was the other news of the week, right, from Microsoft with their ROG Ally X and the ROG Ally, ROG Xbox Ally and ROG Xbox Ally X.
Yes.
So they announced that the first Xbox branded handhelds that they're doing in partnership with ASUS, and they are shipping sometime in 2025. But they have done this alliance with ASUS to get to market quicker and probably at less cost than what they were theoretically, or I guess rumored to be doing internally. And so Insider Gaming reported that they've now canceled the internal project and in favor of this partnership with ASUS, which makes the ROG Ally already. Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think very interesting move by Microsoft to get into the market more quickly through a partnership with someone who's doing a Windows gaming handheld now. But this new machine coming from Xbox is going to have the Xbox interface all over it, and
right.
So and only a partial version of the Windows operating system. Anything that supports games and nothing that has to do nothing with
goodness.
Right?
Amir, would you go ahead and comment on that, because I have something just out of reach here I'm going to grab.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's interesting. Obviously, more new novel hardware is almost always a good thing. It's better for consumers. It's better for competition. And I'm very, very happy for Microsoft. But what's interesting for this one is we don't know the price point because they didn't say what it is. But if we look at past ROG hardware, I would guess it's going to be somewhere in the $700 to $800 price range for the higher end version. If that's where it ends up being, it's a difficult compete. First of all, to Chris's point, just take the Switch out of the conversation. That's like its own thing that is not relevant to this. If then you're comparing it to the Steam Deck and you're comparing it to other options that are available, it can, of course, play Steam stuff on Windows. But I still believe, knowing the Deck 2 is likely going to come in the next few years as well, and the enjoyment get people out of that, and that you can get the deck in OLED. This is not an OLED game set for $549. It's a tough compare, and that's why I believe this is interesting. It's a good experiment, but I believe the likely impact will be this further engages existing Xbox players or Game Pass fans and kind of energizes that base and keeps them in, rather than being like a strong competitor for other handhelds or consoles.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a step back.
By the way, do you guys also remember the X-Boy project?
Yes.
Which was the project that they considered doing back in the days when they were launching the original Xbox in 2000. and Robbie Bach had to make a decision there of like, can we do two things at the same time? And they decided, no, we better focus on the Xbox launch, and so they canceled the X-Boy.
Well, yeah, right. And so I was going to say, let's take a step back in time to June 1996, shall we? It's possible. Let's see. We do not have a strategy to do a $200 game console that is a direct competitor to what Nintendo, Sega, and Sony are doing. Oh, Sega was in there. I just made myself sad. Our business model is to charge software developers money. So you compare a Nintendo game where you have that big ROM, blah, 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 blah. Then Bill Gates goes on talking about the console. Oh, we're not going to have any more inversions like, a console beating out a PC. He goes in here to talk about why it's really about making money on the OS and not making money on the hardware and these sorts of things, right? And so, going back and look at this, it's not surprising that they would then go ahead and lean into the work that these companies are already going to do. Let's face it, right? Like if Microsoft was to build one of those from the ground up, they're going to have to partner with an Asus. They're going to have to partner with, much like Valve did when they were doing the Vive headset, right? They didn't create that themselves. They were working with the HTC. So if you're already down that road, if you already have a premium brand like the ROG brand, and you already have this in market, it makes sense, perfect sense to go ahead and then modify the underlying operating system, the storefront, the engagement for those platforms that are already in development versus trying to work with the same company ostensibly and build a competing product. Doesn't make sense, right?
And this, this version, I guess, with have say less storage requirements than Windows. It'll have fewer, or I guess lower power consumption. It has, I guess, things that take you directly into your games, like your library. It boots into a gaming interface. You can put the games to sleep and you can wake them right up. But yeah, they're not going to have the full Windows operating system. And this reminds me of the conversation that they had with Bill Gates when Jay Allard and I think it was John Tomlinson had to go into Bill Gates's office and say, "Sorry, Bill, but the Xbox is not going to run Windows." He goes, "Wait a minute,
Right.
Wait, but this is why you guys convinced me to go and approve this Xbox, right?"
See, that's what you would just hope they would have went, "Did we? Oh, I don't know where that got lost in translation. No, Bill."
Well, it's also interesting, guys, because I think a lot these days from many different angles about the diminishing returns that we're having to hardware specs. Like I was thinking about how on the Switch 2, it's a 1080p handset. The Xbox One is 1080p too, I believe. And it's like, and I'm sure that the specs are going to be better and higher, and some people are going to crave whatever performance they can get out of it. But I think just the truth is that I don't know if you get the same experience, but when I go around and I talk to friends who are not in the industry or hardcore gamers like us, I would say many are like fully satisfied with 1080p. I would say if they're not, they're absolutely fully satisfied with 4K 60. And it's just like, at some point, it's just like, I wonder if there's going to be some bell and whistle if you have 4K 60 HDR, which surely everybody will, even on the handheld by the next generation. They already do on the home console. And then it's kind of like, where do you go from there? I think about that too.
Yeah. I agree 100%. Like we were saying, I think even last week, we take a look at Steam numbers, right? And look at what people use. You go and look at all the stats. The vast majority of people run 1080p 60, right? And so that's where we are. And, we've talked about this too in terms of like pixel streaming and all these types of things. People that want 240 hertz, 4K, ultra wide, HDR10, interpolated frames are that's not who the market is. Those are people that we know, or they may be us, and we're going to put those freaking space heaters underneath our desk, right? And crank them that way. The vast majority of people don't care, right, about pushing that envelope. And take a look at the games that kind of dominate, some of the space. Yes, we have some of those big, tentpole, beautiful games. but so many other smaller games that don't require anywhere near that kind of performance that have massive amounts of players, right? So there's a place and a space and a resolution for everybody, right? So yeah. Yep. All right. So that's switch to discussions. All right. Since we have Amir with us, we need to definitely go ahead and talk about this. The latest state of the games job market. So look at how convenient that was that this was one of the lead articles, right, on GameSpeak.
Took me some days to get to that one, but Amir has some new data, I guess.
Thank you so much, Dean. No, you're the best. Always showcasing such a wide variety of things, and we appreciate it. I mean, I guess what I would share with our audience is, let's maybe talk about kind of like the good and the bad and the ugly. I think that what we can say is the good is, for now, things aren't getting worse. A lot of the trends that I had carved out and explained to Dean at the beginning of the year, the velocity of hiring improving, the number of open roles being steady between 14,000 and 15,000 globally, etc. All of that is about staying where it is, and that's good. I would say that on the negative front, though, there's a few points to tease out. First, I have reason to believe that while, again, staying lower than I initially projected at the start of the year, I see over the next quarter layoffs coming up a little bit. I still think we're going to be between 6,000 and 10,000, something like that, probably for the year. Mm-hmm. But my biggest warning is
which is better than what last year, right? Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Like the peak awful numbers that we had all seen, 10,000, 15,000, 15,000 plus. I, knock on wood, believe that's over. Mm-hmm. But the flip side of that is I actually am starting to believe that layoffs, knock on wood again, may not be the boogie person and the big headline concern that we worry about so much, but it may start to become, especially for those of us, say, in North America or Western Europe, the comparative cost of labor versus other places and shifting, and the big question mark of AI. The last point that I'll raise is that I've been trying to be, and many who are regular followers of our community friends, they've observed this change in tone and how I talk about things. And that's to say, I'm trying to be a little bit harder, have a harder edge, but always a compassionate edge in talking to early career people who want to enter our industry. I'm starting to see concerning signs that even while, again, all those macro data points I talked about are remaining stable, there still remains a huge gap between supply and demand for early career folks. And when I think about the majors that many of them are coming out of school with, which maybe it's a coincidence, but I don't believe it is, so many are in game design or subfields in game design, which is one of the hardest hit areas. I'm just really trying to urge them to look at non-games roles. And I'd love to get your guys' take on some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree that the areas of the world that are hiring are going to be in places like Asia, as you've pointed out, or the Middle East, or Turkey, very hot spots for game development jobs now. And you compare that to North American locations, and Ubisoft has gone and closed their San Francisco studio, right? And that studio was there for a long, long time, making a lot of their big games. And I as we still see studio closings. I think the good thing is that, one thing we haven't talked too much about is that external development has become a huge part of the industry, right? And Keywords has reached 13,000 employees, and Virtuous is 4,000. And these were companies we never heard of like a decade ago. And they are creating many, many jobs in the games industry. I think there's like some kind of thinking that, an internal AAA studio could be 50 or 100 people, supplemented by external development teams that can go, flex way up and then flex down. And those people, when they flex down, they don't lose their jobs. They're just reassigned to other projects working for those external development companies. And they have studios everywhere. Like they have studios in North America. And I think, if they were all about just low cost, you can bet that these companies would locate most of their workers in these other continents, and yet they do have studios of a lot of people in the U.S. and Canada, right? So, so I think that's a slight positive from my point of view.
Yeah. No, I think yes, and because we have, as an industry, been successful in getting tools out to more people at a lower price point, platforms that allow people, individuals, to be able to create content and push it out there, information and communities that have sprung up around Discord and all these other things to teach people how to build. We're seeing so many more games coming from so many smaller teams. So when you're out there looking for those jobs in those companies, the fact is that there aren't as many of those companies hiring at that scale, because now we're getting all this other content and games coming in that are smaller companies that have started, and so it doesn't look the way it used to. I also really do think that because of the kind of shape of the industry right now, where you have a massive amount of independent content coming in that generates less revenue overall than the AAA studios, which are releasing smaller amounts but taking up a lot of that revenue. The middle's kind of bottomed out. Middle tier studios have just, not all, of course, but by and large, right, we're seeing less and less of those versus kind of the revenue concentration and the quantity concentration at the edges. Having said that, when I look at, like what Ben is doing with Midwest Games, right, and doing shadow publishing and these types of things, those are, I think, are the types of organizations that are going to come in and kind of help swell the middle again. So you may start to see some mid-sized companies start to emerge out of the space that then opens up the pool for hiring. But I just think it's just kind of this wave effect that we've had of the industry coming again out of COVID and kind of where the concentration has been placed. So yeah, it's not, I think that the jobs aren't there, it's that they don't look like the types of job market that we had traditionally seen and the quantity that it's seen. I don't know if that helps or hurts anybody. And, if I'm completely out of my mind, let me know. But it feels like that is where we're seeing the gap, right? Part of the gap in terms of jobs being available.
I think I broadly agree with both of you. I mean, I guess what I would say is a lot of these mitigating circumstances that you're mentioning are definitely helping in the middle. I would say while there's challenges at every level, every job, every function, I worry least about like people who are age 25 to 35 or age 25 to 40. As you both know, and many in our audience know, I've been talking about ageism a lot. I was grateful that GamesBeat allowed us to talk about that at the most recent summit event. I worry about that for a whole variety of reasons of that end. But really, I would say just in general, again, just to reiterate, I really worry the most about the early end. Like there was a big Times article. This wasn't just about games, but it was talking about how some of these firms, and I make no value judgment here, just reporting the news like Dean would do, like, now more boldly saying that like literally their mission, this was I think a few days ago, like they basically want to eliminate work. And, they have all these pull quotes from people at companies being like, we're not even in Amazon parlance, not even hiring anyone below like an L5 anymore for like engineering, because we like have tools or we have AI, or like I saw a quote from a company saying that they have like one person for what would be like 60 or 70 people in data science. And so I really worry about early career. And I think some type of reimagining and rethinking, both at the university level about being honest with families and students about what their outcomes are and about understanding what we're going to do with all these kids. I saw that the college graduate unemployment rate for everybody is up to 5.8%. And if you look at where it's been trending, it's regularly now 20 to 30% above the general unemployment rate. And I think that's a little bit concerning.
Yeah. Yeah. Dean's also programming a robot right now.
No, I have a new battery in my recorder. So
Dean is playing Gyromite over there.
No, he's programming his big track to deliver an apple into the family room. That was very much a Gen X reference. Go look up Big Track TRAK from the 1980s, and you'll see the big track, laser tractor. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I think being honest about anybody coming out of university today about the job market and where they can find application. One of the things that I had a chance to sit in and be a judge on a game, like kind of capstone project and competition for university. And afterwards, we kind of split up into green rooms and just wonderful, students and projects, just really so much thought going into them. But in talking to some, this one person said, well, I really want to get into this company and this is what I want to do. And it's like, well, that's great. Figure out how you get into the company. And they were like, no, like this is the job that I want. So how do I apply for that? I'm like, you're coming out of college. Like you don't have experience doing this. So what you need to do is figure out the company you want to be in, figure out the job you need to do to get into that company, then demonstrate that you can not only do that job, but then also demonstrate where you want to go, because companies want to put people in the best places to do the best work for their companies. And if that's where you want to go, build up your knowledge, build up, your network there and go for that job. And there was another student that said, yeah, I want to be a games consultant. So I'm thinking about just starting a consultancy. And I was like, that's awesome. What games have you shipped or what tech have you worked on? They're like, well, nothing. I'm like, so all things being equal, why would somebody hire you as a consultant? Because you played a lot of games doesn't work, right? And so I think having those very real conversations about this is where I want to be and here are the steps to get there are things that we can do too, as kind of in mentorship programs and some of the resources that Amir has stood up, right, to help people set the right expectations for success, right? So we can get more people in and not get people burned out.
You're absolutely right, Chris. And there's 2 points in what you said that are valuable, which again are not new. We've been saying these things for 3 years, but they both have become even more pronounced. One is that, I talk all the time to students and anybody about not having the dream job fixation, right? Not applying to the top 20 companies, not applying to the top 50 companies. And I can just say the morass of kind of application volume and competition at the top is just becoming more concentrated. The other point is, I think to again go back to the point of geography, I believe this is most pronounced in games for a variety of reasons, but it is also happening slowly more in technology. I think the modern employee needs to be more like Carmen Sandiego. It's like you just have to have this global mentality that you're going to apply to jobs everywhere. And that doesn't mean you should dislocate your family and make that decision. It's a very serious decision.
Right.
But I think at the very least, you need to be aware of that aperture of opportunities, especially in games, for example, where we know only a third of the open jobs are in North America. And my data suggests that number is even going down. And I can absolutely imagine a point in time in the next 12 to 18 months where a quarter of the open jobs will be in North America. And so it's like for all these stats that I quote to people are like, well, that's a tough stat, Amir. And I'm like, it is. But the real truth is like haircut that by 75% if you're only applying in North America. And that's how hard it really is. So like, I think about that personally for myself a lot too.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so make sure you go ahead and check out all of the stats and data that Amir and the community continue to collect. Yeah, dude, you're doing just incredible work just to help people understand where to be, how to go ahead and get there and build their networks up. And so I love it. So please, everybody go check that out. All right, I have another big story that seemed to have passed a lot of discussion recently, but Dean reported on it here. The Apple Games app on Mac, iPad, and iPhone, a deep dive into its discovery potential. So, Dean, I haven't read this article yet by you. I did read the other one.
Gigantically long article, huh? Yeah.
Was it? Oh, yeah, there we go. All right. So give us the TLDR.
Well, I kind of see this as an attempt by Apple to do some penance. Which a lot of folks see some need for justice and reconciliation from the last 4.5 years of litigation that they've had with Epic Games and keeping Fortnite off of the App Store for that long, right? And Fortnite just made it back in, and also just in time for this WWDC event. Apple is now doing some things to help with discovery, right? And so they're adding this Apple Games app pre-installed on every new phone, and also just with every new update that's going to come for existing phones on iOS 26. And so right there on your home screen, you'll have an Apple Games app. You can choose not to use it or what, but it takes advantage of a lot of things, existing things that they have with Game Center, which was an app at one point, but got retired way back in 2016, and they still had the functionality of things like leaderboards or friends or others, other features that you would have in a gaming hub. And now they're reactivating all of that and using it and bringing it in, so you can do things like, say, challenge a friend to a single player, game, and say, here's my score. Can you beat this score? And if your friend beats the score in the next 24 hours, then they win the challenge, right? And so things like that that will help with re-engagement, which is very important for games. Like it reminds people, hey, I actually own this game. I can go play it and go back into it. If you do that a lot, you're more likely to spend more money in that game, right? So Apple is actually getting back into a place where they can help developers, especially with the problem of game discovery and re-engagement. So that's the theory, right?
Right.
And again, it's penance for, like, if you're going to be a platform that takes a 30% tax out of every single purchase that happens with games, either in app or initial purchase, then you have to do something to earn that tax. Right?
Yeah. No, agreed. Amir, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I have two thoughts on this. One is that, look, like the discoverability is a huge problem. As I was reading Dean's article, I was thinking of several other things at the same time. So I was thinking about Netflix games and how, as we all know, penetration of people even knowing about games on that platform and playing it is single digits percentage. And I was also even thinking of my time at Amazon, where our Prime Gaming program, which we were extremely proud of, also had a very low percentage of consumption compared to the overall number of people who use these Prime benefits. And so, look, I have thoughts on this. I'm not an expert on discoverability. I'm not an expert on marketing, but like clearly the visibility of these gaming efforts within these larger conglomerates continues to be a major problem, although perhaps Google and Apple have had the best luck with it so far. The second thing I was thinking is, and this is a little bit off the beaten path, is it does disappoint me a little bit as a parent. And I say this from real world experience. So when our kids, our oldest Theo, started playing games, I did an experiment for about a year where I tried to see what it would be like as a parent experience having him play mobile games. And I'll be honest with you guys, like I just gave up. There were too many games with ads. There was too much garbage. The parental controls are really poor. Even frankly, although I enjoyed Apple Arcade, I find using and managing that and stuff like that was not particularly the best experience either. And so we literally cut mobile games in our house. And that's not a judgment on others who don't, but we're like, we're just not doing that anymore. They can play Switch or whatever. What I'm trying to say is, I think all of these apps are really great, but there's a large percentage of the population of younger folks. And I just think about that and other aspects of how you kind of give more control to the user on what they consume, that if you added more of that in, I think you'd get more out of these apps for many demographics.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. Another interesting angle to that, which is, Apple in 2021 got rid of the identifier for advertisers, right? And so they came down in favor of better privacy over targeted advertising. And so the game industry was almost entirely dependent on targeted advertising to do well in mobile games. And so part of the big game industry collapse that we've seen was related to this, right? Mobile games stalled, and they were the growth driver for a decade for games, right? And so, um, you know, and that's part of the penance here, which was, Apple took this away. People who favor privacy very happy about this move,
Right.
but the game industry really took some hits, and so now
Yeah.
this is a privacy safe and privacy aware approach that they're taking with the Apple Games app, right? And so,
Yeah.
like, restoring some things like discoverability, so that user acquisition is not so hard and expensive as it was before this app came along.
Yeah. So what I would say to this, right, is as Dean was mentioning, right, the penance of kind of building that type of environment before. When Apple Arcade first launched, I was like, oh, okay, they're going to curate and collect and get these games in here, and this is where we're going to go to find these things. And then none of the games changed. They had like the same games always in there, like Sneaky Sasquatch.
Yeah, they
Okay,
have like 200, right?
right,
So,
and you'd expect even rotate some of them out. No, and the other ones always bubble to top. So it felt like, okay, you created a space for me to play, but it doesn't change. And if I am a consumer that has infinite distraction now, and I'm going back 2, 3, 4 times, and it's always the same thing, it's like, I assume it's always going to be the same. The same thing with kind of the Game Center stuff. Every time that popped up in a game, I'm like, there's nothing I'm connected to here. Shut it down. So now that they've got this destination, they talk about connected controllers. Those of us already know we've already been connecting controllers to our iProducts, right? Now you have the center. Now you kind of have to undo the friction that's already been built up by, just apathy of this game sort of thing. Shut it off. Like it is now this concerted effort. So I hope that Apple really leans into this and continues to push and promote this, because it could be a wonderful way for discovery outside of the, I made a great game, I've got it onto this app store. Let's hope that I get some virality, right? Let me go ahead and try to make that virality.
There is one good thing that I really like in this move inside the app, which is they do have the lists of the top games, right? And so, like, you'll see the most downloaded games, right? But they also included for this first time the most played games, right? And so that's a different set of companies. It's small companies can get in there. Anybody who's got a game that really is viral and it's really growing, and people love it so much that they keep playing it. They're able to track, how much play happens with every single game.
Yeah.
The most downloaded list can be it can be, a game can be on that list because it's had the most marketing, right? It's had the most promotion. And so they trick you in some way to download this game, and you download it, you play it once, and you go, this is a dud, like, I'm not going to play this anymore. And but that game still gets to the most downloaded list, and it just keeps getting downloaded and downloaded, even though maybe the play experience is not really all there. And so that's what I like about the difference between the most played list and most downloaded.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So more to come on the new Apple Games app. Looking forward to this. All right, Dean, I had to bring this one up to you just because I thought the number was just incomprehensible, right? NVIDIA believes physical AI systems are a $50 trillion market opportunity. Look, I'm all for, let's, shoot for the future where this is going to go. $50 trillion seems like a really big number to calculate and even like point an arrow at.
Yeah. I mean, you have to look at, like, NVIDIA is already worth $3 trillion, right? As a company. And so they're looking at, like, we're not going to be the entire AI industry, right? And physical AI really suggests it's going to be humanoid robots and robots of any kind, industrial robots, as well as self-driving cars. And if you combine these industries together, then it's conceivable that you start getting into something like a $50 trillion value, right? And every country in the world is building their own sovereign AI systems right now, and even AMD talked about this this week at their own event, and announced an agreement with a Saudi Arabian company. But yeah, if everything works out, then this number is not a crazy number. I think also the interesting thing NVIDIA has been saying is that we have digital twins of everything that are going to accelerate the launch of all of these things, right? And the concept of digital twin is like you design a factory in the digital world, make it perfect, do everything that you would do if you were going to build it in the physical world. You build it in the physical world. You outfit that factory with a bunch of sensors, and it feeds data back to the digital twin, and the digital twin gets better as a result. And so it's a continuous improvement loop. And now you can test things in this sort of metaverse digital environment, right? And so you could test a self-driving car, right? And so you might be able to drive that self-driving car for 1 million miles somewhere in the world, right? You won't cover every single road in the world in every single possible circumstance, but you can do that in the digital world. You can drive it for billions of miles. And so the improvement that comes to the car and its safety then is accelerated much faster than possible otherwise. And so the digital testing of these products brings them to market faster. And so we're going to have humanoid robots that work perfectly pretty soon, right? And we're going to have self-driving cars that aren't going to crash because they've been tested in the digital world, right? This is the bet that NVIDIA is making, right? That this is why they're so optimistic about these predictions they have.
Yep. Amir, I know it's not strictly in games. What are your thoughts on?
My thoughts, I'm going to put on my public policy hat from the years I used to study and work on that, and say that here's what I know. I am the biggest technologist in the world, but the entire world, if I'm not mistaken, has a GDP a little bit over $100 trillion. And if I think back to the tech booms that we've had as a society, even to when I was in high school and we were going through the computer boom, even the biggest booms have led to growth in GDP of maybe 6%, 7% year over year in latest times. Where I'm going with this is, I see all these wild projections here and there by very, very smart people. And you sit down with Excel and you're like, well, if this is going to happen and you're going to realize these assumptions, what does this mean for labor? And I feel like it's impossible to conclude that these things are mutually exclusive, or at least partially mutually exclusive, which is they can only achieve these outcomes if it means a significant displacement of human capital. And so my question whenever I see all of this is great to see this game plan. I hope that they achieve their game plan. What is the game plan for what we're going to do with all these people who no longer can do anything from an economic perspective, from an emotional perspective, from a psychological perspective? And I feel like we're putting 95% of the effort going at one and putting like 0 to 5% of the effort trying to answer the other question.
Well, and then even on top of that, if nobody is working, how are they going to afford to buy any of this stuff?
Yeah.
Right.
So it's interesting, but it's very, I understand both ends of this spectrum, which is like the other day, you guys both know I'm a pretty open person. I made a pretty direct post talking about how like you basically need to embrace AI. And I'm not even saying that I like AI, but you are doing yourself and other people a disservice, because if you don't know how to use this stuff, you're not thinking about it, you're not aware of it, you just don't want to get caught flat-footed. I also understand all the theories of people saying that this is just a big bubble and people are putting huge amounts of money and they're going to be diminishing returns. Anyway, I just feel like, and a lot of people did not like that. And I understand that it's a very scary time, but I feel like we all need to at least be aware and confront this stuff, because it's like I don't know about you guys, it seems to be like 70% of what I hear and talk about most days everywhere I go.
Yeah, look, it is a very exciting landscape right now. My whole thing is let's undersell, over deliver on the things that we create. Let's figure out how to use them to help people, make them better, accelerate their output, make more things for each of us, versus displacement. That's like where my biggest, rub is with it. It's,
I think you pointed out a very big problem about the imbalance of attention towards what's going to happen to people, right? And the only politician that I see talking about this right now is Andrew Yang from the Democratic Party, and he's also talking about forming a new party, but he also is the one saying that we should come up with universal basic income. And you have to restructure all of society if these things come to pass, right? Mm-hmm. So if self-driving cars and humanoid robots come to pass, it's such a gigantic game changer that, the way we're doing things now, on the assumption that everybody has to work for a living, that has to go away, and it has to be replaced by, okay, we're not going to work. We're actually going to have work done for us, and we're going to just go and play.
Yeah.
Right. And, that kind of society is driven by very different things. And I hope it comes to pass, but the risk of it, what happens if it doesn't come to pass is complete disaster. For society.
Look, plus, Dean, they're going to have to wait for all of us Gen Xers to kick it out of here, because, the last the last feral analog to digital anarchist generation, right?
Well, we can play for a living is what I've been saying.
Yes, let's go do that. All right, let's move on to another announcement that happened, that you guys reported on there. Embracer CEO Lars Wingfors will step down as CEO. Deputy Phil Rogers will take his place. So Dean.
He will still be executive chairman, which is pretty important role still.
Yes.
He's going to be on the board of the coffee stain company. But he assembled perhaps the greatest collection of studios any company has ever had. More than 100 studios.
Right.
During the good times, when the stock price of the company was enable it to make these purchases, and things were going good. A lot of it pre-pandemic, but also during the pandemic when the gaming stocks were all up, right? And so Lars got hold of some very interesting technologies and companies, Gearbox among them, but has had to disassemble all of that because they didn't get a round of debt and funding that they had expected to happen. They were talking to the Saudis, and the Saudis pulled the plug on that particular investment. And, the consequences, they've had to unravel a lot of it. And there's still a lot of transactions that are, happening related to splitting the companies up. I think there's been a lot of pain associated with the shutting down of studios or layoffs, or because Lars' plan was too ambitious. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, guys, as you know, for a brief while, certainly what I studied in school, but I started my career in investment banking. And I remember when I was in that first role, a very senior banker at another firm, who will forever remain nameless, we were coming out of a celebration of an M&A deal. And he said to me over drinks, Amir, like, when you've been around as long as I have, you'll eventually get to a point where you won't want to drink champagne and pop the cork when someone announces two companies are merging together. And I've always held on to that, living through the period of like Tyco and all of these big conglomerates. And when I talk to veterans of the industry whom I deeply respect, like the two of you, many of them will tell me, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's a feeling many people share with me, that, we started out as this kind of artisanal industry of making these, kind of works of art that people wanted to create. And then all the business people and all the bean counters came in. And I think a lot of the business people and bean counters added a lot of good things to the industry, many, many good things to the industry, structure, discipline, and so forth. But, I really do wonder, and I'll leave it kind of open, what the reckoning, learnings, go forwards are going to be of trying to push so many of these things into services, conglomerates, and whether that actually has been a net win for everybody. And I have views, but we don't have the time. Let's just say.
So what I will say, I think so. It is great to see them kind of make their way out of this, restructure and focus and do those sorts of things. I think in this case, though, and I brought this up here, which is Embracer's Games Archive. It's like, I need to get a hold of Lars to talk to him about this, right? Being somebody who is super passionate about history and make sure that we tell our stories correctly and we bring these things together. We should be working with the Video Game History Foundation to kind of help with this stuff. So this was something that didn't, that was leading the charge. That it's not like they didn't understand what video games are and why they're important in the world and everything else, right? It was a function of, maybe sometimes it's how do you go ahead and bring all those things together? And, it was moving really fast. But to your point, Amir, the games industry is not unique to disintermediation by the bean counters, right? Coming in, because then all of a sudden, all of the spotlight is in one area. Everybody wants to come in all of a sudden. Oh, we're an expert on this and we're going to do X or Y. And I tell, people that are entering the industry or going out to things like GDC with like big passions. And I'm like, punch above your weight every day. Absolutely. But know who you're fighting when you do it, right? So, so many times I've seen very earnest, excitable people come in and not understand the group they're talking to and say, let me tell you how the industry works. And I'm sitting there with, somebody who's like built like, 3 companies there. And they would sit there politely and go, please share with us how the industry works. And it's that whole excitement, everything, like, you can have vision, you can have, the tenacity to kind of push this stuff forward, but also understand what you're breaking, when you do it. Not to say that that's what happened in Embrace. We know the story there. I'm not part of that. It's not my story to tell, right? But to your point, when we get people in, sometimes we listen to the wrong voices because they're really good at selling up. They, are taking people in a direction that sounds really good, but then you kind of press and go, has anybody tried this technically? Well, no, we'll figure that out. It's like, well, that's not the way technology works. Right. So we have to be careful how we build these things going forward. But I wish, colleagues and friends are the absolute best of luck and best wishes for, a healthy Embracer going forward. And again, the work that they're doing around the archival stuff, oh man, I'm a huge fan of it and just need to figure out how to be a part of that too.
No, me too, Chris. And I want to be really, really crystal clear because this is important. And I'm confident this is how the two of you feel too, right? We have, like any industry, we have some very small percentage of people who are bad actors and are in it for the wrong reasons. But that is a small percentage. Most people, even most business people, even most executives in tough situations that are having layoffs, as I've got to see with a front row seat over the past 3 years, are good actors trying to make the best outcome out of their love for their industry and for the people in it, and are just in situations that are not workable. And like, my comment was only to say, because again, I do think Embracer has done a lot of good things, as has insert company here. It's just, I wonder whether from a structural perspective, it's a winnable, it would have been a winnable business proposition to try to do that for anybody.
Yeah. I bet without, again, any additional insight and internal information there, I imagine it's one of these things, if you bring enough together, the failures, if quote unquote failures in market can be carried by the winners in market, right? And so then everybody, you're in that pool of money, everybody gets to kind of rise up and build, right? And so it is a protective way. And we see this in other, it isn't, like I said, unique to the games. We see this all the time, right? Across a vast number of industries, right? And so that's the thinking, but.
Yeah, we're about to close here. But
we are, because Dean needs to leave.
I wanted to talk about just one more game.
Yeah, let's go.
At the Summer Game Fest Playdays, which was a small game called Out of Words from a very small Dutch company, Kong Orange and Wiredfly. funded by Epic Games.
Yep,
And
right here.
this guy's been making this game for 10 years, and it's stop motion animation where the mouths of these characters fall off them, and they basically have no way to express their love for each other, and they have to go and find their mouths again. So it's a crazy plot, but it's like It Takes Two, where you have to play together cooperatively with somebody on a single screen, 2-player co-op, and accomplish things that involve a lot of trust in the gameplay. Like somebody gets to carry the little puppet character, and that lets them defy gravity, so they could walk on the ceiling and stuff, and the other person walks on the ground, but they can't both have it at the same time. And so like one can make a leap across a chasm, throw it to the other person, and that person then who threw it starts dropping, and the other person starts rising. And so like they kind of switch positions, and it's an interesting mechanic that you would only do if you completely sort of trusted the other character, the other player. And I thought it was very interesting how they built that into gameplay, right? So
it looks stunning,
amazing. Yeah,
and it's one of those games that you can't look at that and say video games aren't art. Like that just looked extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
It's coming in 2026.
Lovely. Lovely. I know we're at time here, but I do want to ask you all one additional question before we ask what games you're playing. Then I'm going to get the both of you out of here. Mike the Ferret over here on YouTube chat had made a comment earlier, and I apologize, Mike, that I didn't see the chat over here because it's on a third monitor to the side here. He said, it's a strange paradox. We don't have professional experience for university education, yet we need experience to get our foot in the door. So who provides that experience is the big question, right? So I want to ask you, both of you, when you started in your career, like in the company you wanted to really get in, like what was your job getting in? Like what was the first like professional job you had that led you on the path to where you are today?
I was a beneficiary of affirmative action because they had an affirmative action program at UC Berkeley training minority journalists to be newsroom journalists during the summer. And it was I got that as a summer job being the copy aide for them. And across 4 years, I learned all about journalism and how to put out weekly newspapers and, just actually get things done inside a newsroom just by being the sole or one of two copy aides working for this program. So without that affirmative action program, I would not be here.
Wow.
Yeah, and for me, it's like as you both know that I've talked about a lot is like I had a thorough business training, right? Studied finance, worked in banking, had all those skills, but I had a kind of different problem, which is I did not want to move to the West Coast. And so basically my story was 15 plus years of building up exactly the skill set for basically what I do now, but having to have that crossover moment, which became harder and harder every year that passed, the 38, of basically convincing somebody, I have exactly what you have on everything on this resume, except it doesn't have the adjective games in it. And you just need to trust me that as a 38-year-old, I can function at the level. So my takeaway maybe for an early career person would be, don't be so afraid of not being in non-games. Just build a skill in something that is valuable, and maybe the crossover point becomes making them convinced of that.
I love that too. And Dean, I didn't know that about your background. That's awesome that you got that experience there that allowed you then to find your way to, becoming the trusted, news of our industry. When I started at Sun, I was the principal. I was the district sales support representative. So I made copies. For those of you that don't need presentation, you used to have to make copies and overheads to use. I picked up dry cleaning, made sure coffee was always full, walked customers in to sit them in conference rooms, and found the stepping stone into sales, found the stepping stone into marketing, and then wrote a business plan and had the right people around me then to sell it up into the CEO of the company. And 16 years later, I left as the chief gaming officer, the chief evangelist, and the host of Java One. So again, it's not that I didn't think I would get there. It's I just wanted to get in the door. Because once you're in the room, that's when the party starts, right? And you can kind of figure out how to step forward.
And to Chris's point, we've all been the gophers. I started working the summer of my second year of high school. And I worked there for 5 summers through the end of my sophomore year of college. And I absolutely was the gopher. So like my piece of advice is like, it's true that the traditional working up through the mailroom is less true than it was, but like have the humility for like anywhere up to like 5 years, 5 summers, whatever you want to say, to literally do whatever shit work someone dumps down and say thank you very much, because that's what I did.
Right.
Yeah.
Because then you are a trusted partner in the business, right? And that goes a long way. All right, we're going to get out of here in a minute, but first let me hear what you guys are playing. Dean, we'll start with you there, buddy.
I just played a little Fruit Ninja on the next playground.
Oh, I gotta go pick one up, for goodness' sake.
Motion sensing console.
Dean keeps pushing that one. I need to check it out for sure. Oh, awesome. How about you, Amir? What are you playing? I think I know the answer, but let's hear.
I am savoring the Switch 2 console from Kyoto, Japan, and I am enjoying playing Mario Kart Road with my children and revisiting the 1P titles in my own time, and I love it.
Yeah, and I do love the post that you made showing 3 generations of Satvats sitting together to play, and that's what video games are all about. As I mentioned up front, yes, playing Switch 2, trying to convince or find time to play using the game chat and stuff like that with my daughter, who has a Switch 2 as well. But, there's only so many hours in the day, for goodness sake. I need to make more time for that. And a lot of Picross. Go check out Picross on the Switch game store, the Namco one specifically. It's so good. But that's it. And we're, again, we hope our other colleague Mark is feeling better. We hope Susan is having a great time out at her event this weekend. But that's going to wrap it up for this week's Boss Rush. Thanks to our special guest, Amir Satvat, for joining us today on this episode. And Dean Takahashi, as always, thank you. Beep, bop, boop. Go reprogram that robot, buddy. And we'll see everybody next week. Thanks, gang. Bye.
Bye, everybody.